In a time where it seems like most Hollywood blockbusters are falling ill to lazy filmmaking, behind the scenes corporate shenanigans, and dull storytelling tropes, director Denis Villeneuve has returned with the second part of the Dune storyline to remind us all how it's done. Following up on the cliffhanger left behind by Dune Part 1, we continue to follow Timothée Chalamet's Paul Atreides as he struggles to pick up the pieces of his life following a tragic betrayal. Joined by Chani, played by Zendaya, the two help lead the struggling Fremen against the dreaded Harkonnens. But as the war on the planet Arrakis continues to escalate, Paul finds himself trapped between conflicting destinies, and must ultimately decide what must be sacrificed if he wants to claim the vengeance he so desperately seeks. To put it mildly, Dune Part 2 is a step up from the previous installment by almost every conceivable metric. Not only is it grander in scale, but it builds on the emotional foundations that were set up before, creating a wholly satisfying theater-going experience that'll be hard for any other 2024 film to top. Now, full disclosure, I had not rewatched Part 1 since the first time I saw it in theaters in 2021. I remember thoroughly enjoying it, but ultimately feeling as if it were just half a story because, well, it was. So before going out to watch Part 2, I popped it in for a quick refresher and found myself enjoying it way more than I had before. So needless to say, I came to that theater prepared. Fully prepared. And make no mistake, this is the second half of the story. In the future, I'll carve out an entire day to have my full Dune experience with both films. That being said, both installments could not be more different in terms of vibes. Whereas Part 1 was an intriguing political thriller, Part 2 felt much more like a grand-scale biblical epic in the vein of the Ten Commandments. They complement each other in such unique ways, and it's all a credit to Villeneuve as a filmmaker. I've said it before, and this solidifies it. He's simply the best new director to come out recently, and what puts him over his peers like Nolan is his eye for detail. He never lets the bigger picture get in the way of the characters. And believe me, this picture is big. I feel like I'd be beating a dead worm with a stick by saying that this movie was a technical marvel. Between its visuals and sound design, I have no doubt the talent here will sweep the Oscars. Greg Fraser has already wowed me with his cinematography in The Batman. Here, he creates the best-looking sci-fi movie since Blade Runner 2049 and 2001. Even if you're not grabbed by its premise, you cannot speak ill on the film's presentation. There are certain sequences that are still burned into my brain, particularly one involving a gladiator arena. Believe me, I could not take my eyes off the screen once. But as I said before, the character work never falls by the wayside due to the visuals. Even as the sequences continue to ramp up in terms of scope, the tension and drama all centers on Paul's internal dilemma. I'll keep the details vague for those unfamiliar with the source material. I myself have never read the book, but I have watched the David Lynch film. I knew going into this thing that Paul would be going on quite the emotional journey, and I wasn't 100% sure on whether or not Timothée Chalamet could pull it off. Good God, was I wrong. The work he puts into his performance here is staggering, and you buy into all of the decisions he makes simply based off of his acting. It's a marvel to behold, and dare I say, is Oscar-worthy. Another standout is Austin Butler as Feyd-Rautha, the antagonistic heir to the Emperor's throne who comes in to crush the rebellion on Arrakis. There was a lot of talk debating on if Butler could drop the Elvis voice, and I admit, I had my doubts too. But the first time this dude appeared on screen, my worries were immediately laid to rest. He was vicious, calculating, but had just enough pathos under the surface to provide depth. I honestly wish we saw even more of him. There was a large gap in time where he seemed to disappear, but when dealing with a story as epic as this one, you can expect that sort of thing to happen, unfortunately. The whole cast here is stacked, and for the most part, every actor fit their character well. There were others who had larger roles in the prior installment who seemed to have been dialed back a bit in this story, and I have to admit, Christopher Walken did feel miscast as the Emperor. Not to say he was bad, but I would just always see Christopher Walken. Every time the camera would cut to him, I'd imagine him going, "What the Mujahideen needs is more cowbell. His father, Duke Leto, hit a watch up his ass." I'm leaving that in, I don't even care. Zendaya has never wowed me as an actress, but I think she was pretty good here. From what I understand about the original book, there were quite a few changes made to her character for this film. But honestly, I think they were all good adjustments that gave her character more agency. The tension between her and Paul makes for some of the biggest dramatic heft in Dune Part 2, and it ultimately leads to a conclusion that left me very much looking forward to the third installment. Guys, I'm not going to waste any more time here. Dune absolutely slapped. If you're one of those people who didn't completely love Part 1, I highly suggest giving this a watch. Even little grievances I had with the last one were fixed here. For example, I remember watching it wishing that Villeneuve had made it a little more weird and abstract like the David Lynch movie. Not to say I found it dull at all, but here, he certainly plays around with more interesting filmmaking techniques, all the while staying true to the themes of the book. With a stacked cast firing on all cylinders, god-tier filmmaking, and great direction, Dune Part 2 solidifies this franchise as a series on the same level as Star Wars and Lord of the Rings. To witness such an out-there, high-concept sci-fi story reach this level of attention it warms my heart so much. While some characters are shortchanged and book purists may take issue with certain directions taken, you'd be hard-pressed to find another cinematic experience quite like this one. So bring on the third one. I'll be ready. Trust me. I'm gonna give Dune Part 2 an A.